city's been growing pretty constantly for the last 20 years, and I think that it'll keep growing. It's a really interesting time for Toronto in terms of thinking about laneways and the potential of laneways. So there's a whole infrastructure of these lanes that connect the city in this really interesting way. Toronto has developed this formal idea of changing the bylaw system to allow for laneway houses, and it's just recent. So right now there are just a lot of garages. Some of them don't even have garages. It's an untapped resource in the city. If you thought about how to increase the density of the city, but not just erase parts of the city and remake it, but have a really sensitive addition to the city and get lots more housing, laneway is a great way of thinking about it. The lane as you see it now is a real typical Toronto lane. This is a northwest lane, but mostly they're east-west, and sort of 100-foot by 17 or 25-foot lots, single-family dwellings, and laneway is just part of how the whole blocks are structured. The typical Toronto situation is just the main house, more or less near the street with a porch, and then at the back, usually a lane, and then usually a garage off the lane. In this case, this property had a residential building.
So there's still a right of way?
Yep. The property widens actually, so it's a bit of a unique property. So the shape of the house is more or less what was here, just with some of the dormers tweaked.
So this widens out?
Yeah, so it widens out there, which is going to be unique for Toronto laneway houses as they get built, because a lot of them will, of course, just be on a 25 or 17-foot lot and have to deal with a more narrow situation. The lanes themselves have some infrastructure. There's storm water collection in the lane. Sometimes there's electrical. There can be other services that come from the lane, as you can see. But in terms of water, gas, anything like that, you got to go back to the main street. So the trick is always connecting your lane house beside or via the main house.
So when you came, was there a garage there, or what was here?
So there was a house. It was actually the same footprint as what you see now. Very different looking, very dilapidated, and in some ways like structurally unsound and very limited.
The goal was to do this as of right, and so we had to leave the same footprint of the existing building. I mean, I think that this transition is pretty interesting, because you come from sort of a harder part of the city right into the heart of the house and a bit of an oasis in the city, a lovely lush courtyard. We really like working on older buildings, and we really like keeping the old layer and bringing a new layer. And the reality here is we had to keep the old structure. Yeah. So in our mind, there was this diagram of just this old, simple peaked roof, old structure, and we're going to insert this new life into it. And so part of that was playing off, just having different relationships to that envelope and the site. And then in doing that and having just this simple split level, it's one space, but each space has different characteristics. And I think when you do that, when you just give a real broad range of experiences in a smaller space, I think you really make more out of it. So we have this relationship to the garden, and this just lovely big opening here with accordion doors that can really just extend the house right out to the courtyard. One of the things, if you're doing a lane house, is that you're most likely working on a small house. Creating different experiences within a relatively small space has a lot of value. And so we came up with this split level idea. There's 5 levels, actually. This is a kitchen, dining, living room area, but with a split of about 2 or 3 feet down. It really creates a sense of a different space, even though we're in quite a small footprint. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so combining elements like the stairs within the space instead of having separate stairs. The split level idea, just from up there, when you open up those doors, you sort of double the living dining space. You can really flow inside and out. We're only a couple meters away, but here now you have an entirely different relationship to the garden. A much more intimate relation, in fact. So you can be sitting here eating your breakfast on your laptop. You have beautiful flowers here, just a different relationship. And we're just within the space of a couple of meters though. You still feel very connected to the 2 spaces, but I think it's a really nice strategy in terms to make a small space just feel like it's a whole bunch of different experiences. And even they're just little fun details, like it feels a little bit like the concrete floor has now transformed into a concrete counter. So not only was I standing on a concrete floor, but now I have a different relationship to that similar material. Now it becomes your counter. And then this piece, it's not only the stair, but you're always looking to make things 2 or 3 things. We've got great storage in here. It's a transitional space. It's obviously a great social place to be. Yeah, like if you had a family in here, I mean, just think of how kitchens work, right? Somebody could be sitting here eating, doing whatever, homework, whatever it is, and people are cooking, and somebody's up in the living room. So it's just, you just really, in a small space, you have to look for those opportunities to just get as much as you can out of things. And I find that this space really captures that. In a smaller space, you want to use millwork, not only for storage, but for defining space. You're separating, connecting at the same time, right? So on that side of this piece, it's coat storage and where you throw your keys and all that, right? And then you could have something on the top. And then over here, it supports the kitchen. So it's a lot of storage in the piece, a little bit more counter type space. It's just the right amount and it doesn't block any kind of social relationship. You can see who's coming and going and all that. So just have to get those things, balance those things right. There's this really important datum line in here. And it aligns with the underside of the windows. It's the top of this piece. We purposefully stopped the washroom ceiling to that line, the pantry as well. Why it's so important is because in a small space, you really want to perceive a larger extent than you might otherwise. If that washroom went all the way up, of course, you wouldn't get the view. You might perceive that the space is shorter than it actually is. And then following the datum, which can be a lot to coordinate, has a quieting effect to the space, keeps it calm. Things aren't at all sorts of different levels. It works a little bit more at the subconscious level, I think. It's important, and keeping everything clean. Zeke did a wonderful job on the millwork, but of course that's the fridge, and just keeping everything very toned down and clean is important. But lots, pantry storage just makes it just enough storage in here. Yeah, so super easy to use. It's Douglas fir, so that was inspired by the old sheathing on the shed. It was in a bit of bad shape, but there were pieces that could be reclaimed. So Zeke reclaimed a lot and did sort of the back softer cladding of the house. And then that was the link to use Douglas fir.
So these are two different images from Toronto Archives. That's the actual structure, which was not that dissimilar when we started working on it. Yeah, so this is the old Douglas fir barn board that was the original structure that we took down, restored lovingly, and put right back up. And then behind you to your left is another image of the front of the facade. That one's from the late 1800s as well. So that was before someone, built it up on top and changed it quite a bit.
Having to keep the existing shell, we wanted that idea to be present in the house. And so the idea of the lower ceiling here, and you've maybe noticed how the bulkheads are overlapping the windows. It's really just trying to embrace the reality of the situation. So allowing this floor to lower despite having the windows just shows this layer of something being inserted into the shell. There's that kind of layering of the old building and the new. As you can see, there aren't many walls, and certainly not a lot that go all the way up to the ceilings. So the reality is services have to run up somewhere. So this is a way of getting them up where they need to go, but then just taking advantage of all the light and the views and not blocking things off.
And we're very mindful in designing and building it as well, not to have like protrusions from walls, so there's no baseboards, there's no casings, everything is a flat and then sort of step back profile.
It's almost floating.
It feels like the wall is floating, yeah, that's the idea.
The stairs are interesting because doing a steel stair in a house is not the easiest thing to do, but how we got to the idea of it being steel, I think, was keeping it as light as possible. Because building around this window, a heavy wooden stair or something like that, we didn't want to do it.
And we really didn't want to obstruct any light or views from the laneway as well.
So an incredibly compact stair, a lot of work just getting the details to work and not hit your head. Lots of worrying about if you're going to hit your head.
This is really open.
And then as you come up here, skylights play a really important role. We inherited the two peaked roofs. In a Lane house, you need windows and light and view, but you are facing other existing houses that have the same demand. So having a skylight and windows where you can curtain off your windows and still get light and view is a really important strategy. And what we really liked here is this is east, so morning light. So getting a space or a bedroom that has both morning sun and afternoon sun just seemed really great. So the skylights are really important. We're working with the roof line here, so real careful attention to how high this floor is, where your head is starting to be in relation to the old existing roof. And what we recognized is, you'll see in the other bedroom how we did more of a pop-up dormer, and here we just thought, as the existing roof was coming and compressing on you, if we could get this detail with the glass, it would really kind of open up again as you came near it. This detail here of the planter outside the window, this is one thing we purposefully did. If you could imagine how this used to work, is the roof came down, it kept going right to that. We sort of took a chunk out of the old building. So we sort of decreased the area, and probably Zeke said, like, why would you want to do that? Part of it was because, as you walk further this way, the existing roof would have been difficult for headroom, but also from the outside, it created a lower facade for the courtyard, is one thing. And then just this layer of greenery, because you don't want to reduce the number of windows, but there are privacy issues. So to be so close to lot lines, we're right on a lane, we're right on two side lot lines, we're right facing a bunch of other houses. So of course blinds become part of it, but I think that landscape becomes another part of the privacy. And then there's storage there. This is storage under, you'll see in the next bedroom, it's a higher floor, so it's storage between. And I think there's a closet here on the other side. And the closet in this room is here.
You'll see how the door has a slit back that sort of mirrors the slope as well.
So in this bedroom, we're higher again, and this has created the height in the living room, having this bedroom up this high. But the challenge is that now you're higher in the roof. So you can see here that this is now the existing roof line, and usable space is way over here. So here we popped up the dormer, and to get sort of a similar headroom relationship as we had in that other space, but the window's much different. The window goes right to the floor. In the two bedrooms, there's a different relationship and experience to the courtyard, to this planter. Just this sense of space with the lights coming in.
And then you also have this feature of all these skylights, which are all smart activated. And all the skylights throughout are all solar powered, operable blinds. So they all open, they have rain sensors, so they close automatically.
That help with climate control.
For sure, yeah.
That's west light, so that's kind of the hotter time of the day, especially with the concrete floors, because in the winter, getting the heat gain in these great concrete floors is wonderful, so leave that open in the winter. The summer, you don't want that to happen, or the heat will keep on giving through the evening.
So how many levels do we have in the house?
Yeah.
Speaking, five?
Five.
Yeah.
The split in the levels, just changing your relationship. So for example, when you come into this bedroom, it reminds me a little bit of bedrooms that I knew in my grandparents' house as a kid. You're up in the roof, right? And so this bedroom purposefully brings you like high up into the peak, so you can touch it and be right up around it. This one you feel like you're really up in the roof. The other one, it kind of soars a bit more. It has a lot of height to it. And so both bedrooms are similar in that it's a typical Toronto scenario where in an idea of having laneway houses, then you will have this kind of vantage point where you'll be looking back onto the houses. And so this is a little bit of a thing to resolve in this. I think landscape can play a role. And in this house, obviously there's a moment where you have this window open and you're not concerned as much about privacy, and there's a moment where you will be. But that's where the skylights keep light coming in, even though you've kind of taken this down. And these blinds are great for this kind of situation because you can have the full privacy there, or you can kind of do this. So these blinds are fantastic for this kind of situation.
And there are all kinds of very unique, like logistical challenges in building a structure like this in such a compact property line and with the laneway itself for access. So, for instance, this stairwell skylight we installed last because we used it to put our cement pump through to actually pour all the floors. So you have to sequence it and really carefully plan it before you execute it. There are also some interesting details like all the switches are not like your typical switch that you would see or your plugs. So even the outlets themselves are all meant to be sort of flush and recessed back so that in keeping with no protrusions and no step outs. And the same thing with the solar powered skylight so that you can get fresh air. And we continued all like the reveal channel details of Douglas fir millwork, even with a little cutout for your toilet paper. And every opportunity that we have solid pocket doors. So this is the fifth of the floors. So this is a space that sort of triples as a little entertainment zone. This is a pull-out bed, so another sleeping area, a workspace as well. About a week ago, there was a very intense computer system here. Behind you is a door to a separate walkout for like the winter use, rather than coming in with your big boots and your big parka jackets, to be able to like actually walk in and out in a way that isn't disruptive to the actual house. For us, it was all about using as much square footage as possible, very thoughtfully, and really making the most of it.
So Toronto is really going to change a lot with the development of lanes. It's slow out of the gate. Everybody's trying to figure out how it's going to work. There's issues with emergency service access, say. This one, I live on a block that has a lane as well, and there's a lot more family life and kids out playing.
The family dynamic is like something very special about the laneways. Like on the evenings, they bring out basketball nets and all the kids are playing, or on the weekends, there's all kinds of almost like mini block parties set up.
And it's slowly going, but as it gets going, you can see how Zeke's laneway house is the first laneway house on this lane. So this lane doesn't quite have that social vibe yet, but imagine when there's 3, right? And imagine when there's families using it, everything will start to transform. It'll be pretty exciting.